troops wearing unidentified uniforms in Crimea today. And the media, and certainly lots of the people we've spoken to, are very confused about just who these people are.
That's right. There was a huge amount of intrigue regarding those photos, Tom, and those images, whether it be photos that were being uploaded onto social media, whether it be images such as this one. In fact, you can see these helicopters going across the sky. That was put up onto YouTube by the account Crimean Crisis today. So that seems to be pretty clear there, right? Images such as that would seem to indicate that it is a heavy military presence, probably, one would presume, a Russian military presence. Let's go to the computer first, so just to see the photos that I was referring to earlier of unmarked troops, right? That's a photo by our own Douglas Herbert, who says a dozen or so soldiers in unmarked uniforms leaving Simferopol airport, right? And this next photo is by an AFP photographer, Vasily Batanov, exactly the same thing. So a great degree of confusion. Perhaps some greater clarity coming through, for example, with that video I showed you earlier. I mean, if there's helicopters, it's clearly a significant military presence of some kind or other. This is the BBC's correspondent quoting the head of Crimean TV. They have weapons and say that they are from the Black Sea Fleet, says the head of the Crimean television. So there were whisperings that that's the way things were going. If you read headlines such as this on the CBS News website, they are, for their part, referring to Ukraine's interior minister, who said that Russian Navy troops were blocking access to the airport. So again, it was sort of competing. It seemed to be going in that direction, but no great clarity in that regard, Tom.
Lots of confusion. And of course, Russia saying that these are absolutely not its... Well, certainly not giving anything away as to any troops they might have on the ground in Crimea. They seem to be telling a very different story anyway in the Russian media.
That's right. And let's take a look at a clip from Russia Today, which clearly they are not identifying those troops as Russian troops. Let's take a look.
No.
Do we have
Doesn't
that clip?
look like we're going to see that
Russia
clip.
Today? No, we don't have the clip. Okay, all right.
All right. So, well, anyways, so the Russian media telling a rather different story from what the Western media narrative seems
That's
to
right.
be.
And let's take a look at this tweet, which is also pointing to some cynicism about that. More totally not Russian troops with totally not professionally looking military equipment in Crimea. Now, that is the Twitter account of East of Brussels, which is very much a pro-EU Twitter account. It sort of charts news and buzz about the European neighbourhood policy. So that would be a Twitter account that would be in favour of Ukraine eventually joining the European Union, Tom.
I think we can now take a listen, in fact, to that extract from Russia Today. Let's listen in.
These people don't have any identification signs on them, but they have now become known as the self-defense squads.
We are Crimeans. Our militia unit consists of workers, retired officers and pensioners. No one paid us to come here. We came here on our own free will.
All right, so that was an extract from Russia Today telling a rather different story about what's going on there in Crimea.
That's right. And then if you go to the telegraph.co.uk, you have reports that indeed the Russian Foreign Ministry essentially confirmed that they did have troops from the Black Sea Fleet which had entered Crimea. So a lot of confusion and a lot of contradiction in the media today, Tom, certainly. But moving on to, I suppose, a broader, the meta story that's coming across in the media in the last week or so. It really depends on what media you are consulting, Tom, in terms of what story is coming across. This is just an example of an article I picked somewhat at random by Daniel Twining in Foreign Policy. He speaks about the hesitance of NATO forces to go into Ukraine or to set up American bases there. And just to quote him, but strategic prudence need not mean bending to the will of an authoritarian regime in Moscow, whose meddling has done so much to prevent Ukraine from embracing its European vocation. So from the way that's written, you would expect that a vast majority of the people in Ukraine would like to join the European Union. It's a much more nuanced picture than that. And indeed, a poll that was conducted in December, albeit by a Kiev-based polling agency, so again, to what degree it's completely objective, is moot. But that poll said only 43% of Ukrainians approve of closer ties with the European Union. So, it depends on what media you're consulting. Newsy.com, which is a news website that compares news coverage around the world, for their part, they're looking at American media and the extent to which this is being simplified down into a Cold War narrative. And they're quite disapproving of that. They say it's very simplistic. Let's take a look at a little edit they did, which illustrates the extent to which that narrative is playing out in the US media.
Shades of the Cold War are returning.
Why it could reignite Cold War flames with Russia.
Many think the Cold War in that way is not over at all.
Seems to be a replay of the Cold War in many ways.
There you go.
The word Cold
that's
War
a pretty
surfaced a few
consistent
times, didn't it?
narrative.
Yeah, and the Russian media might also perhaps be using similar language, are they?
That's right. On the flip side of the coin, you're getting quite a similar dynamic. And Reuters relay one story, which is quite interesting, on Russian radio, where a radio show host Vladimir Solovyov, on a morning phone-in show, essentially asked one guy who was calling in, which side were you on during World War II, accusing him of being a fascist, essentially, for expressing some support for Ukraine's new rulers. So essentially, it seems to be a black or white type dynamic playing out in a lot of the Russian media, and also I think in a lot of the Western media. And just to finish, a quote that perhaps gives us a more of a balanced picture. This is by Max Fisher in the Washington Post. He says, when it comes to understanding something as complicated as the Ukraine political crisis, sometimes you need to be able to hold two competing narratives. So I guess it's about, consulting the various stories that are emerging and coming up with your own conclusion, because oftentimes they contradict each other.
Well, indeed, if it was as simple as all of that, we probably wouldn't be in the state of chaos we're in right now.
Indeed.
Thank you very much indeed, James Creedon. That was Media Watch. Well, it's time now for Focus here on France 24, and